Hello and welcome to the session on water management in the mining industry. The timing of this event could not be more critical. We would like to take this opportunity to extend our deepest sympathies to the people of Kazakhstan following the devastating flooding in several regions. Our thoughts are with all those affected at this difficult time. We sincerely hope that the worst will be over soon and that with the joint support from the national government and international community, Kazakhstan will be able to restore damages caused by these unprecedented and devastating events. Mining operations must implement robust water management plans to mitigate the risks posed by such natural disasters and ensure the safety of personnel and infrastructure. Our esteemed experts will share their views on the current state of water management and the challenges that mining enterprises are facing in the region. Please scan the QR code to take part in the survey and contribute your views on sustainable water management. Together, we can achieve more with less. Your participation is completely voluntary, and your responses will be kept confidential.
Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this last session of today. We've had some great talks this morning, and we've got some more great talks for you this afternoon. This evening, in this session that we have here, we will address water management and doing more with less. This is the first time that MINEX has had a session dedicated to water and understanding how critical this water is for mining and for the population. It's very topical at the moment, as you would have seen from the video, with the ongoing situation. Unfortunately, one of our speakers, the Minister, is unable to attend this session due to that. But we do have three great speakers for you. Please do the survey, scan the QR code, and at the end of this session, we will, after the speakers, we will go through their answers, and then we'll have some answers, then any questions that you have, and a question and answer session for our speakers. I'd like to make the most of this time and talk about one of the most important resources. We've talked about lots of resources this morning, but this is one of the most important resources for mankind, water. And it's very important to understand how that we can better reduce the consumption of water, how we can preserve water, and how we can look at harvesting and keeping our water balance in check. So please welcome our first speaker. This is my colleague from SLR Consulting. He's a principal mining hydrogeologist, and his name is Ed Austin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all today. So my talk's on mine water opportunities, how to maximise value using a few examples. I think when we saw the session tagline, doing more with less, this gave me the idea to talk about these examples. So, introduction to the talk, I just included some nice pictures of myself there. Demonstrate the range of environments we have in Kazakhstan. You can see I'm there in a nice dry, arid pit, and then drilling in the wet, snowy, dark forest. Today, I'll run through some examples that will cover water demand. I'll also talk about water issues around tailings and the opportunities those present. And then I'll have some discussion about groundwater. Okay, so a lot of these examples are quite high level. The first few are based on a specific project. The later ones are general aspirations, ideas, trends that we're seeing within the industry. So this example is it's a semi-arid mine. You can see there the rainfall and evaporation numbers. It's probably a little bit more extreme than most of Kazakhstan. As you may expect, like a lot of operators in Kazakhstan, they're importing water, and obviously there's a cost associated with that. Now, a lot of these operators will have the perception it's a dry site, there's no rainfall. But when you look at the reality of it, some years is up to 490 millimetres in this case. It's highly variable. Obviously, that means it can generate a lot of runoff. If there's a lot of runoff, there's an opportunity to reduce your import. Hence, in this case, the client decided, let's do a study to see what the opportunities are. As you may expect, the scope for this study is an information review. There was a site visit by professionals. As you may expect, they identify some opportunities. You can discuss these with the client and the operator. Make further assessment using a water balance model. In this case, it was done with GoldSim software. And then, as you would expect, start to look at cost-benefit analysis and what the potential paybacks may be. And I tried to simply illustrate with a graphic at the bottom right there why you pay for water on the import route when it comes not entirely free out of the sky, but you have the opportunity to make use of this runoff. So some of the outcomes from this study was, first of all, stormwater harvesting. Ideally, you have these structures which are containing stormwater, these control dams, and there's a lot of seepage and evaporation from these facilities. So these were the observations. They were unlined dams. The infrastructure associated with them was undersized for the job, and there was spilling occurring. The improvements, it seems really obvious. You increase the capacity of these dams, you line them, you upgrade your infrastructure. You can see on the right the pictures. The two on the right, this is the first rainfall of the season. You can see a large pond has accumulated and is seeping out, and is also a large evaporation surface. You can see the one at the top right is spilling across the ground. And then in more normal times, you can see there is underflow seepage that is appearing downstream of the facility. So the value which was realised in this case, there was a 5% reduction on supplied water imports, and this translated into a 10-year payback period on CapEx. Number 3, same site, focusing on the tailings facility. And in the top right, you can see, similar to these ponds and dams, you have losses from evaporation, you have seepage under the dam, but in this case also you have seepage through the dam and seepage through the tailings. A large pond was accumulating and there was low density tailings. The improvements, pretty similar again, reduce that pond surface, improve your decant system and your infrastructure around return water. In this case also they adjusted the pump triggers to bring the pond right down to reduce the evaporation surface. But in this case it was also became apparent that the thickness system was just not up to scratch and was putting too much water onto the tailings dam. So the thickness was also upgraded as part of that process. Now the value realised, this was it was more than the last one, it's 15%, which is better obviously. That's a 5-year payback on that investment, which is substantial. And this had clear additional benefits to the environment with reduced seepage and reduced impact migrating away from the tailings facility in a migration of plume of impacted waters. So example 4, this is based on one example, but it's something we see all the time, particularly undertaking engineer of record roles. Basically, you have upstream raise facilities, and we see it quite a lot, where there's no secondary storage on site. So the operator is getting themselves into this fairly difficult position where you're accumulating rainfall and water on top of this facility, and you're putting yourself in a difficult position. Do I store water on dam and keep increasing my risk? Or do I discharge to environment and potentially I am in breach and I might have to pay a fine? So improvements here, incorporate a return water dam, obviously lined. Like before, increase your infrastructure. Again, reduce your pond volume, increase your freeboard, and look at your tailings consolidation. Now the value realised is a bit more serious. You have a reduction in your likelihood of failure, whether that's overtopping or piping or slope failure. Also, as you will no longer have a large volume of water on your tailings body, if there was a failure, the consequence should be reduced. There'll be less water released, and there'll be less water driving that tailings release in the event of a failure. One thing that could happen is you would therefore have a change in your classification of consequences, and you may lower your insurance premiums associated with that. I just brought that graphic in again so you can see a bit more detail. You can see the decant system moving off to the right, and therefore you're accumulating your water, your excess water, in the return water dam on the right, rather than accumulating your water on top of the facility and increasing your risk. Now, one thing to say that we see is that in the water balance for mine water and for mine sites, the tailings facility is at the heart of it. Now, this is something to get on top of, and if you tackle this, you'll start to solve your wider issues as well. If you don't tackle it, you're going to have an uphill battle to basically address your issues. Everything tends to revolve around the facility. Now, moving on to looking at groundwater opportunities a bit more. You can see, obviously, some of you will be aware that there's a variety of techniques for dewatering and controlling groundwater inflows and collecting them. You can see the illustration on the right-hand side. You have dewatering wells with pumps, in-pit sumps, perimeter sumps, horizontal drain wells, etc. Now, all of these will generate inflow. Some of this inflow can become contact water, and this will accumulate sediments. And obviously, dealing with the silty water increases your wear on your pumps. Also, you then have a sediment load to manage at some point. You might move it away from the mine, but you still have that problem. And flowing contact water can accumulate other quality issues in the mine, whether that's oil and grease from machinery or nitrates from blasting. So what can we do here? Okay, so you can capture these flows, and you can capture them completely, and you can manage them via a completely different system that runs parallel to your non-contact water. Try and maintain the quality and reduce the sediment load within these waters as much as possible. The value you can realise, you have a quality water that's readily available to use elsewhere. You're going to keep your infrastructure going for longer because you should, in theory, have less wear from sediment. And you should spend less on your treatment. And we all know that treatment comes with a heavy carbon cost, so you should reduce your carbon. And additionally, you can see on some mines, they spend a lot of time dealing with these wastes and sediments that can accumulate over the life of mine. Again, related to groundwater, but also just water management in general. You can see the picture there, the figure on the right-hand side shows a generic water balance structure. You can see the interaction between the land surface water, other water bodies, the linkages into soil water and eventually groundwater. Now, what we see in some cases, particularly at investor and institutional review stage, we find the design basis around project water is inadequate. We see projects carrying risks through project stages, and we see, particularly around feasibility and say if you were also doing extension to mines or upgrades, we see peaks and troughs in investment and effort around these issues. For instance, quite often we'll see very limited reconciliation between the predictions and the estimates were made in feasibility and then the operating mine. And you may ask, well, what was the reality that you realised in operation? And there was no judgment made until you come to you want to make a review or you want to go to another stage. So the improvements here are as you can look at this operational data, you can make regular reviews and updates. You can take a proactive nature to it and almost assess yourself against your permitting. Obviously, this can require some front-load investment. And also, one thing we see particularly is there's a lack of technical references around the subject generally. It may be that you have to make your own guidelines for use amongst your organisation to promote this action. But what's the value you're going to get from this? Well, you'll be ready for the next phase. You'll not have this ramp up when you go to mine extension or mine review or closure, where all of a sudden you'll be forced to look at your data that you've accumulated over time and you never compared it to your original feasibility studies. Obviously, it also supports ESG, generally puts the project on a better footing all round, as you're going to generate confidence in your water management, particularly to external observers. Another groundwater opportunity, something we see more and more of, it relates to the wider catchment. We're seeing more efforts related to transparency, data sharing and collaboration. Observations we see have a lot of operators, not just mining, other industries in one district, The regulator, the authorities, they have a challenge. They are under pressure, there are water shortages. These authorities, they have to assess, make an assessment of the operators to have the license they need, assess the environmental impacts. So one thing we've seen for improvements is people come together, share your data and information, share your knowledge. We see more and more people forming and funding local groups and sharing infrastructure. They're trying to provide the authorities with the information they need to make decisions and to allow the assessments that are needed. In some cases, you even see operators coming together with the regulator to form regional groundwater models. It's a very good basis, technical basis, to manage the region together. And you can see the figure on the right is an example. This is from southwest England. In this case, the water supply companies, the main challenge they have is a lot of winter rainfall and summer shortages, so they need storage facilities. So they've done a lot of option studies, and the answer is build a lot more reservoirs. Reservoirs are expensive, they take a long time to build. In the local area, there's an ongoing quarry industry with many operators. There are closed quarries. So now they are looking at, well, can we use one of these quarries instead of a reservoir? In that area, these operators are already working together with the regulator. The value then that realized is reliable storage. It builds decision basis, trust and cooperation generally. And the operator, you're no longer seen as part of the problem, you're part of the strategic solution. So here's my concluding summary. It's getting more value from mine waters. As I said earlier on in the presentation, is your project site really dry? You have to consider your cost, benefit and payback. It's a long-term game. We saw 5 to 10 years there. If you're going to do these things, consider them sooner rather than later. Several times I mentioned there's additional benefits for your operational risk, corporate risk, and also for the wider environment. It supports ESG. There are opportunities as well in relation to the gaps in mine water technical references that need to be addressed. And you can see you have common with other industries. Water is a risk for everybody. And on that basis, some of these challenges, they require solutions that are not just in relation to one organisation or industry. They're for everybody to come together and solve. Questions are at the end, I think, but thank you for listening, and hopefully you found something interesting in there.
Thank you, Ed. That was a great talk, very informative and very interesting. If there's any questions, please can you hold on to those till the end. If we can welcome now to the stage our next speaker, Telman Shiryov from Kazakh Miss.
Добрый день, уважаемые друзья. Мой коллега-спикер обсудил вопросы водных ресурсов. Я хотел бы продолжить через призму казахстанских реалий, потому что много задаются вопросом, как мы должны управлять водными ресурсами, но четких механизмов нету. Да, сейчас, в последнее время, последние 2-3 года Казахстан сталкивается с неэффективным использованием водных ресурсов, и все заняты вопросами концептуальных решения. Но когда речь доходит до промышленного сектора, то там, конечно же, я знаю, что в многих промышленных секторах, и горно-металлургического сектора, и нефтегазового сектора, имеются большие вопросы, как этим управлять. Если в энергетической системе есть какое-либо понимание, то по водным ресурсам даже распределение, чья компетенция проходит, это энергетики или это экологи, это производственники или горнорудный департамент. Соответственно, из-за этого разрыва происходит такие неэффективное распределение водных ресурсов. Еще раз повторюсь, меня зовут Телман Шириев, компания «Казахмыс», но вместе с тем я член общественного совета при Министерстве водных ресурсов. Являюсь также членом парламентской комиссии по реализации целей устойчивого развития и одновременно защитил докторскую по теме ESG и декарбонизации. Давайте начнем с казахстанского обзора, какая у нас обстановка состоит. Если посмотреть на структуру забора воды в разрезе направления потребления Казахстана, то это составляет 65%, это сельское хозяйство, далее идет у нас 25% это промышленный сектор, после этого это идет муниципальная вода, ну и прочее. Да? Соответственно, если посмотреть на фокус, то есть на тематическая наша сегодняшняя конференция, то 25% это составляет промышленная вода. И вот следующий вот этот вот передний маленький шарик как раз таки показывает, что 92% это поверхностные воды и 8% подземные воды. То есть основные конклюжены того, что потребление промышленного сектора составляет у нас 25-30%. Где 90% это 92% поверхностные воды. Также мы можем судить, что только 20% промышленных предприятий используют технологии повторного использования воды, о чем министр водных ресурсов часто упоминает, что он хочет достичь этого показателя к 2030 году до 40%. Это как бы серьезные, амбициозные цели, но вместе с тем мы как бы понимаем, что сейчас мы находимся на отрыве 20%. Ну и если посмотреть при реалии 2030-х годов, то водозабор, потребление промышленного сектора увеличится до 35-40% от всего объема водозабора. То есть мы видим, что динамика потребления промышленных компаний будет расти в разрезе снижения сельского хозяйства. Почему? Потому что глава государства поставил повысить ВВП там 2 раза, соответственно, это рост промышленности, рост потребления воды. И вот мы видим, что структура потребления воды промышленного сектора, она, конечно же, меняется. Теперь, переходя к промышленному сектору, многие задаются вопросом, а с чего начинать? Как делать программу управления водными ресурсами, как реализовывать стратегию управления водными ресурсами. Я так думаю, что около 5, может быть, компаний, крупных компаний Казахстана имеют свою программу или стратегию управления водными ресурсами. Почему? Потому что в Казахстане толком не разработана концепция водных ресурсов. Глава государства отправил на повторное рассмотрение пересмотра концепции, которая была сделана Министерством водных ресурсов, и вот, соответственно, и у промышленного сектора тоже нет понимания, куда двигаться и какие основные индикаторы они должны присутствовать. И вот я бы хотел сегодня поделиться с опытом на одном промышленном предприятии, в котором мы разрабатывали программу управления водными ресурсами. Это для начала мы ставим для себя миссию, видение, определяем 3 наши цели, куда мы стремимся. И вот как раз вот в желтой таблице определены основные индикаторы, основные наши vision, цели, куда мы должны стремиться. Да, они должны состоять из целей, задачи, наименования КПД, целевое значение, потом целевой год, когда мы хотим достичь, ну и, конечно же, базовый год, да, то есть индикатор, от чего мы отталкиваемся. В настоящее время ни в одном промышленном предприятии, я так понимаю, что нет четких индикаторов, показателей, где мы находимся по потреблению водных ресурсов. Есть такие обособленные данные, но если смотреть его в разрезе углубленности, то многие предприятия не совсем готовы иметь четкие данные. Следующее. Мы начали с определения объема водозабора группы компаний. Да, то есть есть определенный холдинг, этот холдинг имеет несколько промышленных дочерних предприятий или филиалов. После этого, когда мы определили, сколько было в 2021, 2022, 2023 году, мы для себя поняли определенные индикаторы, да, сколько у нас потребление воды идет. После этого мы его разбиваем на подземные воды, поверхностные, чтобы понимать, какое у нас идет потребление внутреннее. Далее уже мы разделяем на основные источники производства и вспомогательного процесса. То есть вот этот вот пирог, который с левой стороны виден, он как раз таки разделен на разрезе потребления. То есть там, грубо говоря, добычной цех потребляет синий, переработка потребляет оранжевый, и вот вспомогательный АБК, вот эта буква серым цветом покрашена. То есть мы для себя определили, какой фокус, где больше всего, по каким производственным процессам и вспомогательным цехам у нас идет потребление. Если есть предприятие, вот с правой стороны как раз таки там будет определено, какая компания сколько потребляет. И, соответственно, когда у вас есть полный вижен того, куда мы стремимся и какие компании потребляют, то, соответственно, для каждой компании будет ставиться определенный индикатор для того, чтобы их снижать. Следующее. Далее потом мы начали уже, после того, как определили, какие у нас есть базовые данные, мы начали уже идти по разбивке, по водозабору, по видам продукции. То есть, соответственно, если кто-то выпускает нефть, там параллельно там, на этом у нас, на добычном секторе у нас столько-то потребление идет, там выпускается нефть, да, тут на другом секторе у нас газ, где-то там электроэнергия. И вот это вот потребление воды мы разделяем именно на выпуск именно продукции. Соответственно, мы также уже удельно сможем работать над расходованием его ресурсов. И вот дальше уже мы разделяем удельные показатели расхода на единицу продукции, тем самым для каждой компании выставляем свой текущий базовый интервал, то есть тот базовый интервал, от чего мы будем исходить. Далее я бы хотел рассказать о мировом анализе по в целом управлению водными ресурсами, какие у нас проблемы имеются. Это основные три тезиса. Доступ к воде остается одной из крупнейших глобальных проблем 21 века. Рост численности населения, это увеличение объема водопотребления, это загрязнение окружающей среды, это изменение климата, все которое приводит к большему дефициту воды и усиливает конкуренцию на водные ресурсы, увеличивая конфликты между странами. Сейчас вот
And the conflicts between the countries increase. If you look at the consumption in the oil and gas sector, of course, it's clear that of 100% of the liquid which they produce, 95% is water. Oil is only 5%. In Dubai, Arab Emirates, water is more expensive than oil. And it will bring us to serious consequences, fight for water. The second thesis is the water is the essential resource for mining, and this sector is the biggest area where the water used, and there is not effective water management, which will bring to financial and different types of other risks. Industry, oil, mining, processing industry do not understand fully the issue of the deficiency of water because they don't face any problems so far. But if by the global forecast there will be the deficit of water, then it will tell on the production, and the water will be used rationally. Each produced water from the water sources will be calculated, and of course it will have an impact on the added value. And then according to the report of the Global Non-Commercial Organization, CDP, which deals with reporting about the climate change and water resources, in 2018, the producing sector suffered from the financial consequences related to water for $20 billion. Percentage of producing companies which suffered from the risk of water lack totals to 33%. But why do we carry out the international analysis? We do it to learn the lessons and to eliminate such consequences. Of course, it could tell on the production. If you look from the point of view of the Kazakhstani analysis, there are major 4 problems in the result of the analysis. Now, water intake totals 25% for the industrial sector, and the potential of the underground water is 7.5% of water consumption is due to the consumption of underground water, which is not so far known to us. And the next, underground water, 90% of the underground water is not used so far. If we do not control extraction and we do not form effective water, of course, so we shall not have the water now. But 90% of rivers have more waters in the springtime, and
Узбекистан, вы знаете, с Киргизией, с Россией.
Other states, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyz, Russia, we depend on them. According UN program, we can experience deficit in water in 2050, which will lead us to a reduction of GDP by 2050 by 6%. And a similar forecast was presented by the Global Institute of Global Resources. By 2040, the deficit will increase 80%, will be higher than 80%, making Kazakhstan the second country in the world in terms of water deficiency. The current situation with the floods in Kazakhstan poses a lot of questions. within the last 3 years, we've heard about the deficit of water resources, urging us to save water. At the same time, we are flooded. Our regions are flooded now. Because of the disbalance, we've heard about the deficit of water, while now we see the entirely different picture. So I believe non-effective melting water management is one issue, and the lack of responsibility of the government agencies. And of course, another factor is the climate change. You've heard what happened yesterday in Dubai, storms and rains, and the water sewage system was not intended for such floods, not in Dubai alone, but all over the world in general. If we look at the dynamics in Kazakhstan, we will notice 3 starting points in 2015, 2018, and 2021, with the share of population that has access to central water supply infrastructure in urban area, 87% and 51% in rural area. Then we noticed some improvements in urban area, 94% and 59% in rural area. 2021 shows that the urban consumption totals 98%. And 83% in rural area, 93%. You know, the public policy plays great role in water management. Without clear concepts where we would like to move, I cannot imagine any effective mechanisms. And in October 2023, the president highlighted the need to improve access to drinking water. Now let's move to the current reforms and current legislation. How Kazakhstan plans to make sure that the water is used effectively. Here you see the objectives and goals of the programs and plans for optimization of water consumption in Kazakhstan. It is aimed to improve the current situation through international cooperation, development of legislation, institutional reforms, restructuring of water intake and water supply structure, digitalization through smart water initiative, which is becoming more and more effective, and some other initiatives. We also split them into Kazakhstan's contribution into the global initiatives, such as preservation of the ecosystem of water systems and water resources. And the gray picture shows that Samruk-Kazyna, for example, has a plan on effective use of water resources in its portfolio companies. If we do so in other companies, we can achieve good indicators altogether. Speaking of the mechanisms for the strategy implementation, we will highlight introduction of effective water resources management, secondary use of water, assessment of global platform, CDP water security, and enabling sustainability in the use of water resources and proactive interaction with the stakeholders in the area of water management. I would like to show you one example with the final forecast and realities by 2020, how the water resources can be managed. If we take the orange bars, you will see the prospects of water consumption without any instruments, indicators, and new technologies. The blue bars stand for the balance between minimization of the water resources consumption to technologies. Technologies if we don't use them. With that, let me conclude. I can answer your questions if you have any.
And that was very interesting. Some really interesting figures that you had there, numbers relating to water usage and how improvements have been made in some areas. So we'll hold on questions for the end, but if we can invite our last speaker now, Ivan Rastogurev, who's a hydro consultant, and he will speak about his 3D modeling, I think. Yeah? Thank you.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Two previous speakers emphasized the very important challenges. And in my presentation, I will try to address one of the tools that can be used to tackle this problem. I'm from Hydro Consult company. We are suppliers of MINEX software intended for the modeling of underwater, surface water through fee flow code. And my presentation will be dedicated to this specific code and potential tasks that it can address. So the code was developed by Professor Dirsch in Germany, in the German Democratic Republic. Then it was purchased by DHI company. It's a company, it's a Denmark company. So we are suppliers of this software in the CIS countries of this software and FIFLOW in particular. You see the list of our clients in CIS, and casting and polymetal are the Kazakh companies. So why FIFLOW? And also the scope of application and potential. FIFLOW is more than underground water. Underground water waters envisage and apply a lot of processes relating to them, such as transmission of mud and dirt, melting waters transmission, chemical reaction, leaching processes, desironing, and many other biochemical barriers, and many other things, many other tasks. So the software itself is robust and comprehensive. It allows to model comprehensive processes taking place underground. It's user-friendly and robust. I'm going to talk about its details, and we can quickly move from some prospects to modeling of solutions. For example, you see the scheme with geological data, some facilities, equipment, hydraulic equipment, pumps, and so on, which already reflected and integrated into the model. Coming back to the FIFLOW, the number of users in different countries. Germany takes the lead in using the software. Also includes China and Australia. In CIS countries, it's less popular because mostly in this region they use ModFlow. But we observe more often specialists approaching us for FIFLOW because it's faster and it fits into the mining needs better than the other one. So the drainage calculations and modeling in mines, different calculations such as filtration through dams and construction, impact on open mining, salinated water in underground from underground waters, FIFLOW, and many other calculations, geochemical processes. FIFLOW allows to calculate details such as freezing, impact of freezing, taking into account evaporation. Accumulation of water allows to set up geochemical parameters and take into account the breaks, and also the calculation of the water sanitation zone. Also, the dissemination of radionuclides in underground waters. FIFLOWS allows to use flexible 3D networks and 2D models. I'm going to show you later. You can discrete your scopes, your areas, split them into the cells and use different indicators and parameters to model the situation. You can use both 3D and 2D models. They can be also added by 1D and 2D elements with the discrete elements to set up the parameters for hydraulics, tunnels, brakes, wells, and so on. It doesn't have any limitations in terms of the number of cells. You can also model the warm mass transmission using multi-component approach, different chemical reactions, and so on. Also, speaking of chemical and physical processes, chemical reactions, and what is important, the software is a commercial product. FIFLOW, you can use it if you have a ready model. You can use it. You don't need a license. You don't need to pay for that. But if, for example, you are doing calculations, you can simply open FLOW in different model and see its characteristics. You can set up complex parameters such as movement of underground water, density, concentration, chemical reactions. It can also include different packages such as micromine, leapfrog in either side. Programming interface allows you to prepare some additional codes using Python and C++. Here is an example of the picture on the right side, and on the left side you see chemical reactions and chemical parameters that you can use. You can use different formulas and make computations. FIFLOW allows you to be very accurate in terms of geographic surface, taking into account the shape and format of rivers, terrain details and characteristics, speed up the calculations through different math formulas, and also establish variable parameters depending on time and marks. Terrain, for example, marks which can change if, for example, you have changes in your mine, or if you have a tail, you can also include this into the software. FIFLOW allows you to transfer the old models and add new parameters. I'm going to talk about the benefits of 3D and 2D networks. For example, here is a network on the left side for underground facilities. It has a lot of details, but if you zoom in, the network is increasing. You can save you can save a lot in terms of the size of the network. Let's take a vertical screen and picture how it will look in the model if we set the parameter include the parameters into the model. We see some deviation if we are dealing with some geological layers which differ. So users can include tetra elements which are also accepted by the model, by FIFLOW. For example, here is tetride and prisma formats. So the flexibility of the network is very good. You can also use very useful and user-friendly imports of the results of your modeling and calculations. Data interpolation, digital data, different formats, and a very useful editing tool. It cannot compete with smart GIS, but still it's pretty user-friendly. You can also integrate other details, useful detalization, for example, the fields of speed within the mine or within the break layers. It's a useful, it's a comfortable online visualization during your calculations. You can accelerate the process using different calculation models. And let me show you 3D and 2D modeled results. You see the geological calculations with the blue one, which possess better penetration characteristics compared with the green ones. Here is another model with green and red signs, marks standing for the level of pollution, depending on the level of underground water. It can be easily managed during the calculations. You can create the flow lines, water intake, cover the area of water supply. You see on the top the storage facilities. You have left and right water intake facilities, which are also significant for decision-making processes. The wells allow you to build different shape of wells. They can be horizontal, they can be vertical. Let me show you one example of such calculations. It's pretty unusual. There was a field in the seasonal freezing area with the negative temperatures for most of the year, with exception of the 4 months, for summer warmer months. So the model was intended to calculate the level of penetration of the frost because it was expected that they plan to start the construction in this area and potential damage that could impact the building. So the red one shows the less penetrable layers in our field, in our site. I forgot to say that it is a profile model, and I will show you a video with the development of hydrodynamic situation. Can you help me please to start the video? So the video shows how the situation can evolve in winter periods. And you see the layers which will be prone to ice. We see the graph of inflow into the sites. We see the freezing, the layers that will be freezed. The white lines show the pressure, the red line. So we see the upper layer, which is frozen, and we see the reduction in water supply, about 1 cubic meter. And then during the warmer period, in the major part with the less concentration, with the warming of the layer on the surface, we have some melting layers, but inside we have frozen layers, and it allowed the business to take a decision regarding the hydro technology solution. This is one of the examples how our modeling works, how our software can be applied. It offers a lot of opportunities, and this is one of its opportunities where we can change the level of penetration depending on the season.
The pores which are filled to the pressure. What is free flow? It's free of charge package to view the free flow. This is the level of the technical support rendered by a company, which is very high. You can check it up if you are our client. There are training courses, online courses. And the advantage of the commercial software which is updated on a permanent basis is there. We have different types of licenses for hydraulics, for heat transition, for hydraulics and heat transition. You can combine and it will be a full package, but it will be more expensive. But our company, Kazakhstan, supplies MINEX software, technical support to work with the program products and with the created models. If you do have already models, we can help you to upgrade, to calibrate your models, to analyze the scenarios, to go through the expertise, to introduce the models with the customer, and to bring models and to bring models from other old models from MatFlow, for instance. What is our company? What is about our company? It has rich experience in modeling for more than 20 years. Our colleagues work in this area. The scientific approach is used among our colleagues. We have specialists with degrees, and they use modern and advanced technologies. We have the softwares of the global level. All the specialists are certified by the Academy DHI. That's it. Thank you for your attention. So, Eva, welcome, please.
Again, another very interesting talk, and I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end. That kind of concludes the presentations that we have for you this afternoon, but we will now go through the answers to the survey, if they're available. Yeah. And then following on from the answers from the survey, we'll do some question and answers to the members of the panel up here. Okay, so the amount of people here to start with that represent an industrial enterprise are 100%. That lets us know who we're dealing with here. How do you assess the current state of water management in the mining industry in Kazakhstan? So everybody has said it's efficient. So that's also a very interesting result there. The next question. Kazakhstan is experiencing the largest flood in 80 years. How seriously have the floods affected the work of the mining enterprises in Kazakhstan? So it looks to me as if we have is that one answer there?
That's only my answer. Yes. I was trying to tell you, sorry, actually only one person voted, so it's not a very good sample. Sorry,
okay, so it's not a very
long.
good sample. So I think for the time being, if you could perhaps do the survey for us, that would be very useful. It's no good talking about it if it's one person's answers. And then the results of this will be put up on the MINEX forum at the end of the conference, and you can see the answers there. But please, we welcome you to fill out the survey. It would be very interesting for us. Okay, so if we move on now then and ask, is there any questions that anybody has for our panel here? Nurlan? If you could introduce yourself, Nurlan, and say where you're from, and then your question, please.
I think it's better to put it on like this way, so that people from behind can see you as well.
Okay, sure.
I'll start in Russian first. Уважаемые коллеги.
Dear colleagues, I am Nurlan Zhumadilov, manager of hydrogeology of ERG, and it's a pity that for this very important topic we have a few representatives of decision makers of the mining companies, because they could have an impact on the water saving in the enterprises. But I want to ask a question. Now we work over the development of the water code by ICANPA and industry. We want to have an impact and to influence on some legislations and laws which should limit the work and activities of subsoil users and enterprises.
Restrictions with the water law in UK or maybe worldwide, because nowadays what we are seeing with our new water code, that every small water accumulated in any lowland would be assumed as a water body, and we are not going to be able to mine anything over there. So what would be your suggestions?
I have two. At the moment, I'll use example of two projects I have in the UK.
I don't hear you. The mic is not on.
Is this good? Okay. So I'll use the example of two projects I'm working on in the UK. So the UK system, basically, you make an application to the authorities. They ask you to demonstrate the environmental impact of your mining operation. They ask you to assess it for severity. They ask you to look at how that operation will impact other water users. And then they ask you to mitigate that impact. So quite often, you'll be entering the local abstraction permitting regime locally, and they work on the basis of water availability. So in the water catchment, they will classify each catchment as to what the water stress is. In some cases, they will say you can't have any water. In some cases, they will say there's water available, but these are the restrictions, sometimes based on season and base flow, like we talked about. And yeah, you have to assess it and demonstrate what the impact will be and how you will mitigate it.
I have another question.
Но есть еще один вопрос. Я на русском опять.
It will be translated for you in English.
The next question, dear colleagues. What shall we face is transfer of surface water facilities in the current water code. Any river up to 200 kilometers of length is considered as a water resource, but for mining enterprises, it's a problem that a small creek is considered as a water object that has a water protection zone. We don't have any right to mine there if it is a small water creek. We want to know, are there any cases which permit to transfer water facilities, maybe a river, a water pond, lake, with local accumulation of water in the UK legislation? Is it possible to solve this issue? But now in our water code, we don't have any rules which are prescribed to transfer water facilities to the site where there is the economically beneficial, maybe, production of resources. To remove rivers, to remove creeks, and etc.
In the UK example, in my presentation, you remember the last slide, the Southwest England, with the water resource operators and the quarry operators. Now in that example, that is a karst environment. They're limestone quarries, but they are open pits. Some of them are 100 meters deep. And in that case, they are cutting off the groundwater flow route from the highland through the karst, through the essentially mini caves, to the river and small streams, which then, this is at the start of these small streams, which go on to flow down through the county and, a very nice area. Now in these cases, as an example, the operator, that water enters the pit. They have to take that water, they have to put it in an augmentation reservoir. So augmentation is a process of where you pump water into a river to compensate for flow, low flow or flow loss. So this is the situation they are in. They store the water that they are accumulating in the pit. They store it in one or two reservoirs adjacent to their mine site, and based on the measured water flows, at the site or very far downstream. They have a pumping system to essentially put that water back in at what should be the natural rate, not just throwing it all in to, damage and erosion. So it works well. It's not actually that complicated, but it's difficult.
So there is a law that allows you to change the route of the river, or to change the location of the some.
You're allowed.
To mine that.
You're allowed to change the catchment behaviour, but you are trying to replicate the natural condition beforehand, basically. So it's never the same. It's never the same, but it's good. It's as good as it can be, because they recognise, they need the stone. The quarry industry has to continue. So.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions for any of our speakers? Okay, I actually... Oh, you have another question? Okay.
Because this is my feeling.
No, go, please.
Then, Delman, I want to ask you, we all understand that Kazakhstan is facing a very complicated period. We shall have problems with surface waters. We have so many enterprises which produce water from the shore water ponds. There is a certain risk. There might be a certain risk, and we understand that we have huge reserves of underground waters which can be used by us. But I want to ask you, do you have an emergency plan for the enterprises to transfer to the water-saving technologies, or to try to maximize the return water from the return water supply systems? And if you do have any such approaches, can you share with us your strategic plans? Thank you for the question. It's a very important issue for the mining sector. I worked in other mining industrial companies of oil and gas, and I'm also working in the Senate, in ministry, and I have my civilian position about water saving. I represent Kazakh Mys, and we have a direction of sustainable development, which will focus on sustainable development and ESG principles. We divide the development into 5 pillars. ESG will be with a major focus on decarbonization, on emission scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, the second water resources management, and the third waste management. The example which I referred to today, it happened at different other industrial companies. G-Play will be carried out in Kazakh Mys, because if we measure where we are, we do have, of course, information, activities are there, but they are not well structured. We don't have any indicators. We don't know where we are moving to. Now we are developing the strategy on water management based on the principles which I talked about today. We want first to increase the use of the return water, which is a major indicator. Then we want to understand and to digitalize the water management and inflow. Maybe there are no sensors, maybe there is a poor calibration. We have a lot of assets, that's why we need to understand how the record keeping is happening. I participated in writing of the program of Samruk Kazana about water resources and resources management, including water resources management for oil and gas sector, but we face one problem. We don't have who is responsible for what, and the figures are variable, and that's why we cannot set up the indicators. But when we pass over to your question, in Kazakh Mys, we shall develop the program on water resources management up to 2030, where the major indicator is to increase the return water use, systematization. Number 2, systematization of big data, which we do have, and the third, we shall use the currently used instruments, we shall use them, and we'll add something through R&D. The head of the country said that we should pay much attention on R&D. That's why we shall look at all this from the point of view of the scientific approach. This year, we think that the draft of the strategy on water resources will be presented of Kazakh methods and in continuation of the discussion about the strategy. In your strategy, you consider only monitoring monitoring of water use. Are you ready to look at the monitoring of the underground water, surface waters? Are you ready to for automatization of these processes? Do you have qualified geologists, hydrogeologists who are ready to work? It's a good question. The system of water resources management will include not only monitoring and digitalization to these flows, but it will look at reduction of water consumption and will consider surface waters underground in Balkhash, Kengir, Jeskazgan region. We shall cover all the impact of the production on water resources. It will be a special research. We'll order it with the idea to see what is the impact of the production facilities, and we'll work with the population in terms of the ESG. As for the work of underground waters, it's a good question. Yes, a specialist who geologists and engineers. We wanted to build a plant, and we had a problem that there is a deficit of hydrogeologists, and we were not able to understand what will be the consumption of water for this new production facility to be launched. If we, for instance, do not calculate it in the correct way, because the calculations were at the starting moment wrong, then everything will fail. It's not a problem only for our company, but it's a problem for many companies. So far, this is our vision.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from any of the audience? No? Okay. I have a question for both Ed and Talman. So with water water security being increasingly recognized as critical operation for mining, what gaps do you often see with mining projects moving forward from, say, scoping to feasibility study? So maybe, Ed, you can answer first, and then Talman, if you can answer second.
Но в скопингу, конечно, два вопроса важны: сезонность и изменение климата. И это вот основные пробелы или трудности, наверное, которые мы испытываем на сегодняшний день.
So the question was, with water security increasingly recognized as critical operational risk for mining, what gaps do you often see with mining projects moving forward, from scoping study through to a feasibility study?
I think that the major risks are lack of data, initial data for water management in the country, for the industry. Number two is unmanageable system of the climate change, impact of the green gases on the water system as a whole. As we know, the water floods could be minimized while using some preventive technologies by machine learning and which could make a focus of water floods on our situation. And there's a major focus on risk management in water resources is the focus on the climate change and to change the instruments. Kazakhstan ranks 23 in terms of the green gases production, which is a very strong instrument, which has a very serious impact on other countries because our industry is energy intensive, consuming, and many countries will look at us carefully and how we manage such processes. And I would say that change climate should be considered in synergy with water resources management, and we need to see where we are to set up the indicators by 2030, 2040.
Thank you. And so, Ivan, a question for you as well regarding the software. At what stage do you find that mining companies would implement your software? Is it at the very beginning, or are you finding it's more at the end now that they have to do something with the water because water is a problem? And how much data do you need?
Thank you, Tracy. It's a good question, and I think it depends on specialists and hydrogeologists and their qualification. So I can see in Kazakhstan, in Russia, in some other regions in Europe that some mining companies have a very good qualification of hydrogeologists, and they can have good prognosis, and they can estimate all influences of global heating problems. And you see we have problem with global heating and melting of frost because I demonstrated a model with some this small moment of 1 year, but if we try to consider a prognosis of for 50 years, we don't have any deterministic models how climate will change. So I can suggest that I have half of the degree in 10 years. But I'm not sure that it will be realistic. Maybe 10 degrees in 10 years. I don't know. Tomorrow I will have a report. There I have prognosis for 100 years with increase of half of the degree in a year, but it's not so deterministic. And in our modeling, we depend on other specialists who do their own prognosis about weather, about rain, about evaporation. So we are, I think we should work together and combine some synergy of solution. And to, of course, we need to verify our models to calibrate, and we are, of course, depend on field data. So field data, it's very poor and very big problem in our research. So anyway, I am a scientific specialist, and I depend on other investigations. So anyway, we need to increase our qualification.
Does anybody else have any more questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for attending this session this afternoon. I think we've learned quite a lot about water. And I'm sure we're going to see this water session on the MINEX agenda again in the future, as it's something that we know that mining needs water, and we have to address those issues that we talked about this afternoon. So if you could give a round of applause to our speakers, please.